The desert air in Copper Ridge carried the taste of dust and desperation, a city built on copper mines that had died decades ago, leaving behind only rust and ruin. The heat pressed down on everything like a weight that never lifted, baking the cracked streets and abandoned storefronts into a landscape of surrender. Inside the Mercy Point pharmacy, the air was different, cooler, clinical, carrying the faint scent of antiseptic and cardboard boxes. Dr. Maya Chen moved between the shelves with practiced efficiency, her dark hair pulled back in a tight bun, her white coat pristine despite the chaos that surrounded her daily work. She was new to Copper Ridge, having arrived 6 months ago with nothing but her doctorate in pharmaceutical sciences and a determination to help people who had been abandoned by everyone else. She stood out in Copper Ridge. Not just because she was an Asian woman in a predominantly white and Latino community, but because she represented something the city hadn't seen in years: competence without corruption. Some of the older patients whispered about her when they thought she couldn't hear, questioning whether someone like her could really understand their needs, whether her education made her out of touch, whether she was really qualified despite her credentials. Maya had learned to ignore it. The doubt, the second-guessing, the way some patients would ask to speak to the real pharmacist before realizing she owned the place. None of it mattered. What mattered was the insulin she dispensed to diabetics who couldn't afford hospital care, the antibiotics she provided to families with sick children, the blood pressure medication that kept people alive. But lately, something had been wrong. "Dr. Chen, I need to talk to you," whispered Elena Vasquez, a 76-year-old woman with arthritis so severe she could barely grip the prescription bag Maya handed her. The woman's face was bruised, a dark purple mark spreading along her cheekbone like spilled ink. Maya's trained eye immediately catalogued the injury: blunt force trauma, recent, likely within the last 48 hours. The pattern suggested a closed fist, not a fall. "Mrs. Vasquez, what happened to your face?" The old woman's eyes darted toward the door, then back to Maya. "I fell. The stairs in my building, they're not safe." Maya had heard that before. Too many times. She gently took Mrs. Vasquez's hand, examining the defensive bruising on her forearms, the kind that came from trying to protect yourself from someone else's violence. "Mrs. Vasquez, falls don't leave marks like this." The woman pulled her hand back, tears welling in her eyes. "Please, Dr. Chen. Just, don't ask. Some things are better left alone." Maya wanted to press, wanted to demand answers, but she could see the fear radiating from the elderly woman like heat from pavement. So she nodded, helped her to the door, and watched her shuffle out into the brutal afternoon sun. That evening, Maya stayed late, reviewing her records. The pattern was undeniable. Over the past 3 months, she had treated 17 patients with suspicious injuries. Broken fingers. Fractured ribs. Contusions that suggested beatings rather than accidents. All of them gave the same kinds of excuses: fell downstairs, walked into a door, wasn't paying attention. She was still at her desk when the first brick came through her window. The explosion of glass sent Maya diving behind her desk, instinct taking over before thought. When the sound faded, she looked up to see the jagged hole in her storefront window, shattered glass glittering across the floor like scattered diamonds. The brick sat in the middle of the pharmacy floor, a piece of paper wrapped around it with a rubber band. Maya's hands were steady as she unwrapped the note. "Mind your own business, or you'll need more than medicine." She stared at the message for a long moment, then carefully folded it and placed it in her desk drawer. She had seen threats before. During her residency in Chicago, she had worked in neighborhoods where gang violence was part of the landscape. She had treated gunshot wounds at 2 a.m., had watched people die because they were too afraid to come to the hospital, had learned that sometimes the only thing standing between people and death was someone willing to not look away. Maya wasn't going to look away now. The next morning, she hired a glazier to replace the window and opened the pharmacy exactly on time. Her first patient was Marcus Webb, a former construction worker who had lost the use of his legs in an industrial accident 5 years ago. He rolled his wheelchair through the new door with practiced ease, but Maya noticed immediately that something was wrong. His hands were shaking, and there were fresh bruises on his wrists, circular, the kind that came from someone grabbing and twisting. "Marcus, are you okay?" He wouldn't meet her eyes. "Fine, Dr. Chen. Just need my pain medication refilled." Maya processed his prescription in silence, but her mind was racing. Marcus was a proud man, someone who had rebuilt his entire life after his accident, who volunteered at the community center teaching kids woodworking from his wheelchair. Seeing him reduced to this, the trembling, defeated ignited something in her chest. "Marcus, if someone is hurting you, nobody's hurting me," he said quickly, too quickly. I had an accident. That's all." But his eyes told a different story. They flicked nervously toward the window, scanning the street outside as if expecting someone to appear. Maya followed his gaze and saw them, 3 men standing across the street, watching the pharmacy with the casual menace of predators who owned their territory. One of them caught her looking and smiled a cold, calculated expression that sent a clear message. We see you. We know what you're doing. Stop. Maya held his gaze for 3 full seconds before turning back to Marcus. She handed him his medication and lowered her voice. Marcus, I'm here if you need help. Real help. He took the bag with shaking hands. The best help you can give me, Dr. Chen, is to forget you saw anything. He rolled out quickly, and Maya watched through the window as the 3 men followed him down the street, maintaining a careful distance but making their presence known. They were hurting him, controlling him through fear alone. That night, Maya did something she hadn't done in 5 years. She went to the storage unit she kept on the edge of town and opened the locked footlocker in the back corner. Inside were things from her previous life. Before pharmacy school, before her doctorate, before she had decided that saving lives through medicine was her calling, Maya had served 8 years in the army. She had been a combat medic attached to a special forces unit, deployed 3 times to Afghanistan and once to Syria. She had learned to fight in close quarters, had trained in hand-to-hand combat, had earned certifications in weapons handling and tactical medicine. She had seen what violence looked like when it was organized, systematic, and ruthless. And she had learned how to survive it. Maya ran her fingers over the contents of the footlocker: tactical gear, a knife with a fixed blade, a Glock 19 she had purchased legally but never expected to use again. At the bottom was her old combat medic patch and a photograph of her unit, 12 people who had trusted each other with their lives in places where trust was the only currency that mattered. She closed the footlocker without taking anything out. Not yet. She wasn't at war. But she was starting to realize that Copper Ridge had been at war for a long time, and nobody had bothered to fight back. Over the next week, Maya started asking questions. Carefully, quietly, speaking to her patients in private, piecing together the story that everyone knew but nobody said out loud. The Scorpion Cartel controlled Copper Ridge. They had moved in 7 years ago when the last copper mine closed and the city's economy collapsed. With no legitimate businesses left, the cartel had filled the vacuum, running drugs through the desert corridors, establishing protection rackets that forced small business owners to pay for safety that never came, and controlling the local government through bribes and blackmail. Their leader was a man named Victor Salazar, known on the streets as Ella Scorpion, the Scorpion. He was a ghost, rarely seen in public, operating from a fortified compound on the outskirts of town. His enforcers handled the daily business of keeping Copper Ridge under control. The 3 men Maya had seen outside her pharmacy were part of Salazar's street crew. They collected payments every week, moving from business to business with the mechanical efficiency of tax collectors, except there were no receipts, no regulations, no appeals process. You paid, or you suffered. Maya learned that Marcus Webb had been late with his payment. The bruises on his wrists were a warning. If he missed the next deadline, they would break his fingers. If he missed the one after that, they would torch his apartment with him inside. Mrs. Vasquez had tried to negotiate a lower payment because her social security check had been delayed. They had beaten her as an example to others. The pharmacy itself had been exempt until now. Salazar apparently had some vestigial respect for medical facilities, or perhaps just recognized that killing off the only pharmacy in town would be bad for business. But Maya's questions, her refusal to look away, had attracted attention. She was becoming a problem. The second warning came on a Thursday evening as she was closing up. She had just locked the front door when she heard footsteps behind her in the alley where she had parked her car. Maya turned to find 2 men blocking her path, both wearing the casual street clothes that marked them as cartel enforcers. Dr. Chen, said the taller one, a man with a shaved head and a scar running down his left cheek. We need to have a conversation about respect. Maya kept her hands visible, her body language neutral. I'm listening. See, that's good. Listening is important. Mr. Salazar, he likes people who listen. He heard you've been asking questions. Talking to people about things that don't concern you. Medical issues concern me. That's my job. The shorter man, stocky, with tattooed forearms, stepped closer. Your job is to fill prescriptions and mind your own business. People fall down. They get hurt. That's life in Copper Ridge. You trying to be a hero, that's not life. That's suicide. Maya's heart was beating faster, but her voice remained calm. Years of training in high-stress situations had taught her that panic was a choice, and she chose not to make it. I'm not trying to be a hero. I'm trying to help my patients. Scarface smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Then help them by staying out of the way. Mr. Salazar is generous to people who cooperate. But people who cause problems. He let the sentence hang in the air, pregnant with threat. What kind of problems are we talking about? The kind where pharmacies burn down. The kind where pharmacists have accidents. The kind where bodies get found in the desert and nobody asks too many questions because, well, Copper Ridge is a dangerous place. The tattooed man reached out and grabbed Maya's arm, his grip tight enough to bruise. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to stop asking questions. You're going to stop making people uncomfortable. And you're going to remember that in Copper Ridge, Mr. Salazar decides who's safe and who isn't. Maya looked down at his hand on her arm, then back up at his face. Something in her expression must have registered because he suddenly looked uncertain. Let go of my arm, she said quietly. Or what? Maya's training took over. She had spent hundreds of hours learning Krav Maga, the Israeli combat system designed for real-world violence. The fundamental principle was simple: neutralize threats as quickly and efficiently as possible. She moved, her free hand shot up, catching the tattooed man's wrist and rotating it sharply outward, breaking his grip while simultaneously stepping into his space. Before he could react, she drove her knee into his solar plexus, knocking the wind from his lungs. As he doubled over, she caught the back of his head and slammed it down onto her rising knee, feeling the crunch of cartilage as his nose shattered. Dropped like a puppet with cut strings, Scarface was already moving, reaching for something in his waistband, but Maya was faster. She closed the distance in 2 steps, deflecting his arm downward before driving the heel of her palm into his chin, snapping his head back. He staggered, and she followed up with a sharp elbow to his temple that sent him crashing against the brick wall. The entire encounter had lasted less than 6 seconds. Maya stood over them, breathing hard, adrenaline coursing through her system. The tattooed man was groaning, blood pouring from his shattered nose. Scarface was conscious but dazed, one hand pressed against his temple. She crouched down next to Scarface, her voice deadly calm. Tell Salazar that if he wants to have a conversation with me, he can come himself. But if he sends any more of his people to threaten me, I'll send them back in worse condition than this. Are we clear? Scarface nodded, his eyes wide with shock and pain. Maya stood, walked to her car, and drove home with steady hands. It wasn't until she was inside her apartment with the door locked that she allowed herself to shake. She had just declared war on the Scorpion Cartel. The retaliation came at 3 a.m. Maya woke to the sound of breaking glass and the smell of gasoline. She rolled out of bed instantly, military training overriding the disorientation of sleep, and saw orange light flickering through her bedroom window. Her apartment was on the 2nd floor of a building next to the pharmacy, and someone had thrown Molotov cocktails at both structures. She grabbed her phone, called 911, then pulled on clothes and ran into the hallway. Smoke was already seeping up through the floorboards, thick and black. She pounded on the doors of her neighbors, an elderly couple named Rodriguez and a single mother with 2 kids, screaming for them to get out. The building's fire alarm was shrieking now, a piercing wail that cut through the roar of flames. Maya helped Mrs. Rodriguez down the stairs, the old woman coughing violently as smoke filled the stairwell. Behind them, she could hear the mother crying as she carried her children, one under each arm. They burst out onto the street just as the fire trucks arrived, sirens wailing, lights painting the scene in stark red and white. Maya stood on the sidewalk, covered in soot, watching as firefighters sprayed water onto her pharmacy and her home, fighting to save what could be saved. By dawn, the fire was out, but the damage was catastrophic. The pharmacy was a burned-out shell, its roof collapsed, its walls blackened. Her apartment was even worse. Everything she owned had been destroyed. Clothes, furniture, her grandmother's antique tea set that had survived a journey from Taiwan, her medical school diploma, her photographs from Afghanistan, all of it was gone, and spray-painted across the sidewalk in bright red letters was a message. Final warning: Detective James Cardenas arrived as the sun was rising, a weathered man in his 50s with gray at his temples and the exhausted look of someone who had seen too much and could fix too little. He walked the perimeter of the burned buildings, took photographs, asked questions that both of them knew wouldn't lead anywhere. Finally, he approached Maya where she sat on the curb, wrapped in a blanket provided by the paramedics. Dr. Chen, we need to talk. Maya looked up at him, her face streaked with soot and ash. I know who did this. I know you know. That's not the point. The point is what you're going to do about it. I'm going to make them pay. Cardenas sighed, sitting down on the curb next to her. Listen to me very carefully. Victor Salazar is not some street thug you can intimidate. He's connected politically, financially, legally. Half the city council is in his pocket. The sheriff's department looks the other way. Hell, even I can't touch him because every time we try to build a case, evidence disappears or witnesses recant. So you're telling me to give up? I'm telling you to be smart. You take him on directly, you die. That's not pessimism, that's math. He has 30 armed men working for him, and they have no problem killing anyone who gets in their way. Maya turned to look at him, and something in her eyes made him pause. It was the look of someone who had made decisions under fire, who had calculated odds in life or death situations and acted anyway. Detective Cardenas, with respect, I've faced worse. And I'm not running. Cardenas studied her for a long moment. You military? 8 years. Army combat medic. 3 tours. He nodded slowly, a flicker of understanding crossing his face. That explains how you took out Ruiz and Mendoza in that alley. They're both in the hospital, by the way. Ruiz needed surgery on his nose. Good. Cardenas stood, brushing off his pants. I can't officially support what you're doing. Can't condone it, can't help you. But. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card, writing something on the back before handing it to her. That's my personal cell. If you find yourself in a situation where you need someone to show up and ask questions at the right time, call me. Maya took the card, understanding the offer for what it was. Cardenas couldn't act against Salazar directly, but he could create opportunities for someone else to do what the law couldn't. Thank you. He nodded, then walked back to his car, leaving Maya sitting on the curb as the morning sun climbed higher, turning the desert sky from pink to harsh blue. She had nothing left. No home, no business, no possessions except the clothes on her back and her car parked down the street, but she also had clarity. The Scorpion cartel had taken everything from her, and in doing so, they had made a fatal mistake. They had assumed she would break. Instead, they had just freed her from any reason to hold back. Maya spent the next 3 days planning. She couldn't go after Salazar directly. He was too well protected, too insulated by layers of security and paid officials. But every organization had vulnerabilities, and the cartel was no exception. Their power came from 3 sources: money, drugs, and fear. Take away any one of those, and the whole structure became unstable. Take away 2, and it would collapse. Maya started with the money. She rented a cheap motel room on the outskirts of Copper Ridge and used her laptop to research the cartel's operations. They moved product through the desert, but they collected payments in town every Thursday. Like clockwork, enforcers made their rounds to businesses, apartments, and individuals who owed protection money. The collections were handled by a man named Diego Torres, a cartel lieutenant who ran the street operations. He was careful, professional, always traveling with at least 2 bodyguards. The money went straight to a counting house and nondescript building in the warehouse district where it was sorted, recorded, and then moved up the chain to Salazar. Maya followed Torres for 2 days, learning his patterns, his routes, his schedule. On Thursday evening, she watched as he made his final collection of the night, a visit to Marcus Webb's apartment building. She was waiting in the parking garage when Torres and his men came back down. Maya had borrowed, without asking, a tactical vest and gear from a friend who ran a private security company, along with a taser and zip ties. She wasn't planning to kill anyone, not yet, but she needed them incapacitated. When Torres stepped out of the elevator, chatting casually with his bodyguards, Maya was already moving. She hit the first guard with the taser before he could react, 50,000 volts dropping him to the concrete. The second guard reached for his gun, but Maya was faster, driving her knee into his groin and then her elbow into his temple as he doubled over. Torres spun around, going for his own weapon, but Maya had already closed the distance. She grabbed his wrist, twisted it painfully behind his back, and slammed him face-first into the concrete wall. The money, Maya said calmly. Where is it? Torres groaned, blood dripping from his nose. You're dead. You're so dead. Maya increased the pressure on his arm, feeling the joint strain. The money. Last chance. In the car. Trunk. Maya zip-tied all 3 men, then popped the trunk of Torres's Mercedes. Inside were 3 duffel bags, each stuffed with cash, nearly $200,000 in protection money collected that day. She loaded the bags into her own car, then pulled out her phone and took a photograph of Torres zip-tied on the ground, his face bloody and defeated. She sent the image to every contact number in his phone along with a message: the Scorpion cartel doesn't own Copper Ridge anymore. Every dollar they take, I'll take back. Every person they hurt, I'll avenge. This is just the beginning. Then she drove to the community center where Marcus Webb volunteered and left all $200,000 in a box on the doorstep with a note: for the people of Copper Ridge. Use it to fight back. By morning, the entire city knew what had happened. The cartel had been robbed. Someone was fighting back. And Victor Salazar was furious. Maya knew the retaliation would be severe, so she didn't wait for them to come to her. She went on the offensive. The cartel's drug operations ran through a series of stash houses scattered across Copper Ridge, nondescript buildings where product was stored before distribution. Detective Cardenas had accidentally on purpose left a file on his desk during one of their conversations, and Maya had photographed the addresses before he returned. She hit the first stash house on Friday night. 3 guards, minimal security, and approximately 50 kilos of cocaine stored in the basement. Maya went in through the back door after cutting the power, using night vision goggles she had borrowed from her military contacts. She neutralized the guards with precision, taser for 2, a chokehold for the 3rd, then called in an anonymous tip to the police. By the time she left, sirens were already approaching, and $2 million worth of cocaine was about to be seized. She hit the second stash house on Saturday, the 3rd on Monday. Each time, she moved fast, struck hard, and disappeared before anyone could respond. The cartel was in chaos, scrambling to protect their remaining operations, pulling men from other duties to guard their product, but while they were focused on defending their stash houses, Maya was targeting something else, their supply chain. The cartel received shipments from Mexico through a corrupt customs official at the border crossing 40 miles south of Copper Ridge. Maya had traced the connection through financial records she had obtained, hacked, from Torres's laptop before dumping it in a dumpster. She couldn't stop the shipments directly, but she could make sure the right people knew about them. She compiled evidence, shipping manifests, payment records, photographs of the customs official meeting with cartel members, and sent it to the FBI's El Paso field office, the DEA, and the Department of Homeland Security. Then she sent copies to 3 major newspapers and 2 investigative journalists known for covering cartel activity. Within 72 hours, the customs official was arrested, the border crossing was under federal investigation, and the cartel's supply line was cut. Victor Salazar's empire was bleeding from 1,000 cuts, but Maya knew this couldn't last. Salazar wouldn't sit back and let someone dismantle his operation. He would respond, and when he did, it would be personal. She was right. On Wednesday morning, Maya received a phone call from an unknown number. When she answered, a calm, cultured voice spoke in lightly accented English. Dr. Chen. My name is Victor Salazar. I believe we have some matters to discuss. Maya's pulse quickened, but her voice remained steady. I'm listening. You've caused quite a bit of trouble for me in recent days. Stolen money, destroyed product, disrupted my business operations. You're either very brave or very foolish. Neither. I'm just someone who doesn't believe you own this city. Salazar chuckled, a sound without humor. Belief is irrelevant. Ownership is demonstrated through power, and I have more power than you can possibly imagine. But I'm not unreasonable. I'm willing to negotiate. I don't negotiate with terrorists. Such harsh words. I prefer to think of myself as a businessman providing services in a difficult economy. But very well, if negotiation is off the table, let me make you an offer instead. Stop your campaign against me, leave Copper Ridge, and I will allow you to live. Continue, and I will ensure that your death is slow, painful, and public. I'm not leaving. There was a pause, then Salazar's voice hardened, losing its veneer of civility. Then you've made your choice. I want you to understand something, Dr. Chen. I have spent 15 years building my organization. I have survived challenges from rival cartels, from federal agencies, from idealistic politicians who thought they could change things. They're all dead or broken now. You will be no different. We'll see. Yes, Salazar said softly. We will. The line went dead. Maya sat in her motel room, staring at the phone, knowing that the war had just escalated to its final phase. Salazar had made his move, and now she needed to make hers, but first, she needed to understand exactly who she was fighting. She spent the next 2 days investigating Victor Salazar, peeling back the layers of his operation to understand the man underneath. What she found was both impressive and terrifying. Salazar had started as a low-level enforcer for the Sinaloa cartel in Mexico, working his way up through intelligence and ruthlessness rather than violence alone. He had recognized early that the future of cartel operations wasn't in flashy displays of power but in quiet integration with legitimate society. When he established himself in Copper Ridge, he didn't announce his presence with car bombs and massacres. Instead, he bought businesses, bribed officials, and systematically made himself indispensable to the local economy. He owned the only grocery store that delivered to the poor neighborhoods. He funded the youth sports league. He donated to the church. By the time people realized what he was, he had already woven himself into the fabric of the city so thoroughly that removing him would tear everything apart. But Maya also discovered something else. Salazar's protection came from above. Councilman Richard Pemberton, the most powerful politician in Copper Ridge, had been on Salazar's payroll for years. Pemberton ensured that police investigations went nowhere, that zoning laws were ignored, that federal agencies were kept at arm's length. Salazar was untouchable because Pemberton made him untouchable. Maya wanted to destroy the cartel. She needed to remove its political shield first. She reached out to Detective Cardenas, asking for a meeting in a public place, a diner on the edge of town where they could talk without being overheard. Cardenas arrived looking haggard, circles under his eyes. His usually neat appearance disheveled. He slid into the booth across from Maya and ordered coffee before speaking. You're making my life very difficult, he said without preamble. Every time you hit one of Salazar's operations, the pressure comes down on me to find you. The captain is screaming, the sheriff is calling, and Pemberton himself showed up at my office yesterday demanding to know why I haven't arrested you yet. What did you tell him? That I don't know who's doing it. Which is technically true. I don't have any evidence that would hold up in court. Maya leaned forward. I need your help with something bigger. Pemberton is the reason Salazar can operate freely. Take him out, and the whole structure collapses. Cardenas rubbed his eyes. You think I don't know that? I've been trying to build a case against Pemberton for 3 years. Every time I get close, witnesses disappear or evidence gets lost. The man is bulletproof. Nobody's bulletproof. They just haven't been shot with the right ammunition yet. What are you suggesting? Maya pulled out a USB drive and slid it across the table. Financial records showing payments from Salazar to Pemberton. Emails coordinating police responses to avoid cartel activity. Recorded phone calls discussing protection arrangements. Everything you need to arrest him and make it stick. Cardenas stared at the USB drive like it was a live grenade. How did you get this? Better if you don't know. But it's all legitimate, no illegal searches, no coerced confessions. Everything was obtained from sources that will hold up in court. You hacked into Pemberton's accounts. I obtained information that was carelessly left accessible on inadequately secured servers. Despite the situation, Cardenas smiled slightly. You're going to get yourself killed. Probably. But not before I finish this. He picked up the USB drive, turning it over in his fingers. If I move on Pemberton, Salazar will know you're responsible. He'll come after you with everything he has. I'm counting on it. Cardenas studied her for a long moment. You want him to come after you? This whole thing, the money, the stash houses, Pemberton, it's all been about drawing him out. He's too protected, too isolated. I can't get to him as long as he stays in his compound surrounded by 30 armed guards. But if I make him angry enough, personal enough, he'll break his own rules. He'll come for me himself. And you think you can beat him? Maya met his gaze steadily. I think I'm the only one who can. Cardenas pocketed the USB drive and stood. I'll give you 48 hours before I move on Pemberton. That should give you time to prepare for whatever's coming. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just survive. He left the diner, and Maya sat alone with her coffee, watching the sun set over the desert, knowing that she had just lit the final fuse. Now all she could do was wait for the explosion. The attack came sooner than she expected. Maya had moved to a different motel, paying cash under a fake name, parking her car in a different lot, and only traveling at night. But Salazar's intelligence network was better than she had anticipated. She was returning from a supply run buying food, water, and medical supplies, when she noticed the tail. A black SUV, hanging back 2 car lengths, making the same turns she made, maintaining the same speed. Maya didn't panic. Instead, she drove toward the industrial district on the north side of town, an area of abandoned factories and empty lots where she could control the terrain. If they wanted a confrontation, she would give them one on her terms. She pulled into the parking lot of a defunct textile mill, a sprawling complex of brick buildings with shattered windows and overgrown weeds pushing through cracked asphalt. The moment she stopped, 3 more vehicles appeared, boxing her in from multiple directions. Maya counted the men as they emerged, 8 in total, all armed with handguns or submachine guns, all moving with the practiced coordination of professional soldiers rather than street thugs. These weren't ordinary enforcers. These were Salazar's elite security team. She stayed in the car, hands visible on the steering wheel, watching as they approached. The leader was a tall man in his 40s with close-cropped gray hair and the bearing of someone who had served in a military somewhere. He approached her driver's side window and tapped on the glass with the barrel of his gun. Maya rolled down the window. Dr. Chen, he said in unaccented English. Step out of the vehicle, please. Mr. Salazar would like to have a conversation with you. Tell Mr. Salazar that if he wants to talk, he can call me. I'm not interested in going anywhere with you. The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I'm afraid that wasn't a request. You can come willingly, or we can make this difficult. Your choice. Maya calculated the odds. 8 armed men, multiple vehicles, open terrain with limited cover. Fighting here would be suicide. But if she went with them to wherever Salazar was, she would be walking into a controlled environment where he had all the advantages. Either option was good. She was still calculating when the decision was made for her. One of the men opened her rear door and fired a taser, the barbs catching her in the side, 50,000 volts coursing through her body. She convulsed, her muscles locking up, and before she could recover, hands were dragging her from the car. They zip-tied her wrists behind her back, put over her head, and threw her into the back of one of the SUVs. The drive took approximately 30 minutes based on the turns and the sound of the tires changing from asphalt to gravel. When they finally stopped and hauled her out, Maya could smell creosote and dust. They were somewhere in the desert. They marched her forward, her feet crunching on gravel, the heat of the afternoon sun beating down even through the hood. Finally, she heard a door open, felt the temperature drop as they moved into air conditioning, and then the hood was ripped off. Maya blinked, her eyes adjusting to the light. She was in a large room that might have once been a barn or warehouse, now converted into something between an office and a throne room. Expensive furniture clashed with industrial architecture. Art that was probably stolen hung on walls that were half brick, half corrugated metal, and sitting in a leather chair behind a massive wooden desk was Victor Salazar, was smaller than she expected, maybe 5'8", slim build, wearing an expensive suit with no tie. His face was handsome in a severe way, all sharp angles and cold intelligence. He looked like a banker or a corporate executive, not a cartel leader, but his eyes gave him away. They were the eyes of a predator, calculating and patient. "Dr. Chen," he said, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. "Please, sit. We have much to discuss." The guards cut the zip ties and shoved her into the chair. Maya rubbed her wrists, assessing the room. 2 guards at the door, 2 more flanking Salazar's desk, the leader who had captured her standing off to the side. "All armed, all alert. No easy exits." "You've been quite the irritant," Salazar continued conversationally. "I must admit, I underestimated you. I thought you were simply a naive idealist who would break easily. I was wrong. And yet here I am, tied up in your compound. Seems like you won." Salazar smiled. "Did I? You've cost me millions of dollars, disrupted my operations, damaged my reputation, and now you've somehow obtained evidence against